You just have to try.
I did try.
No, you didn't. We have been in the same position for 15 minutes. Please, come on. Just do it once with me.
Can we go home now?
Percy, we paid for this class.
In this swimming scene, we see young Percy and Sally kind of go back and forth of, you have to try, and I did try, and that's very relatable for a dyslexic, especially when it comes to homework. Trying, or even schoolwork in general, saying you have to try, and it's I did try, and people not necessarily believing you. A lot of times dyslexics can be called lazy, and we are very far from lazy. It's just that when we try, our brain doesn't work and process like everyone else, and so it may seem as though we didn't do our best when in fact we actually did. The other thing that's really relatable in this particular scene is that last line when Sally Jackson says, we paid for this class. I kind of relate that to tutoring. Parents who are able to afford tutoring, like that is something that kind of gets said sometimes pretty often when the kid doesn't want to participate in tutoring because it is challenging.
Can I ask a dumb question?
It's like you need me to make fun of you.
Shoot. Follow-up stupid question. Dude.
In this scene, we see Percy say close to each other, I clipped them together, can I ask a dumb question? And I can relate to that so much because when you are growing up and you are going through school and you are continuing to have to do the hardest thing every single day, you can definitely feel dumb. And then when you're older too, recently a word that I misspelled was lemon when I was playing Wordle. And so like that made me feel dumb in that moment, but I know that it's my dyslexia. Because I've known since second grade, I can look at that situation and know that it's not because I'm dumb, it's just because my brain switched it up. Confusing my right and my left is another example that sometimes can make you feel dumb, but when you know it's your dyslexia, it's kind of a little bit easier to give yourself grace. But in this scene, we know that Percy's definitely feeling probably a little bit overwhelmed with this entire situation. These three clips are pretty close to each other, so I'm going to play all three of them and then talk about them.
Any ideas where we might find one of those?
I do. A sanctuary dedicated to Athena, built by one of her demigod children a long time ago. The water curing back at camp, it should work for poison too, right? Maybe it needs to be naturally running water for Poseidon to be able to heal him.
We gotta get everybody out of here.
In all of these scenes, we see her problem solve very quickly, being able to see the problem and figure out a solution. Not all of them work, but she's able to figure it out very quickly. In this first scene, the problem is that they need somewhere to go to be safe, and she immediately knows exactly where to go, and that would be the arch. In the second clip, we see Percy's sickness, and she knows that the water healed him back at camp, and so she's thinking that this water would also heal him. But I also clipped the part where she realizes that it has to be probably natural running water because it's not working from the fountain. The last clip we see, she needs to get everybody out of there because she knows that Echidna and the Chimera are coming. And so she ends up pulling the fire alarm because she knows that's going to be the fastest to get everybody down and safe. So this episode really does a good job kind of showcasing her problem-solving ability as a dyslexic and ADHD individual.
It is so hard for him to stand back, to see you struggle, but he's here, and he's so very proud. Trust yourself.
There are two parts that I really want to talk about in this scene in particular. The first one is the line, "It is so hard to stand back and see you struggle." And I hope that parents don't necessarily stand back. However, see you struggle, I think, is something that a parent can definitely relate to with any child who's struggling with anything, but specifically a dyslexic child who's maybe struggling with spelling, struggling with reading, struggling with homework. Especially homework can be really, really challenging. So I think that's something that is very easy to relate to. The other thing to this part is when it also says he is so very proud of you. I think that is really, really important to say at this exact moment because it is not when he's succeeding, it is when he is struggling, and I think that is a really important part to say. When he's actually doing his best, but he's not necessarily succeeding at the moment. The second part to this is honestly one of the most important parts so far of this entire series in my opinion, and that's trust yourself. I think this is a very hard phrase in terms of trusting yourself because there are times where you literally can't trust yourself. I can't always trust myself when it comes to spelling. I can't always trust myself when it comes to right and left. And I know that everybody has those feelings around something. However, it's a constant daily battle in order to figure out when to trust yourself and when to get help or use an accommodation or whatever it may be to kind of figure out how to solve that problem or whatever you're facing. Even though this moment is referring to trust yourself breathing underwater, I think it's something that I can immediately relate to when it comes to dyslexia. Overall, I'm pretty happy with this episode. I don't think there's been a bad one yet when it comes to dyslexia representation. We're halfway through the season, and I honestly love these little tiny moments that we get to see with young Percy and Sally Jackson. I think those have been really, really important to include in the series. Dyslexia representation in every episode, I think for this series is really important because if you have neurodiverse characters and you're talking about it and you're bringing it up, then you have to see elements in it in every single episode because it's part of everyday life, not just when you're at school. And so I do love to pick out these moments and really see the representation not only for dyslexia, but also ADHD. I'm excited to see how the rest of the series does this, given that we're halfway through.